wanted to definitely get an episode out there as soon as possible because it's October and we all know that it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I will definitely be recording several episodes related to breast cancer and just different aspects. It's such a complicated topic. Everybody's breast cancer story is so different. And I just want to kind of cover as many bases as I can as far as breast cancer and get as much information out there as I can. I wanted to start off this episode with my breast cancer story. There are, like I said, everybody's story is different. And at the end of my story, I will kind of go over a few things that were really important. So 6 months after my husband passed away in 2019, I was in the shower and I was just getting washed in the shower and I felt a lump in my right breast. I was scared to death and I made an appointment with my gynecologist right away. She felt the lump and I quote, this is exactly what she said to me. She said, I am 99.9% sure that that is a cyst, but you should definitely have a mammogram just to make sure. So I went and had my first mammogram when I was 38 years old. And I just want to point out that mammograms are not recommended for women until you're 40 unless you find something that you're concerned about. So I was concerned about the lump. And even though she thought it was a cyst, thank God she sent me for a mammogram. I went for the mammogram. I went back for the first mammogram. They put me back in the waiting room. They called me back and said I needed another mammogram, which didn't sound good to me because right away, I just felt that something was wrong if they needed to do another mammogram. After the second mammogram, they pulled me into a room and they said, it's definitely not a cyst. We can't tell you if it's cancerous or not because you need a biopsy. I cried the whole way home. I was crying hysterically, which makes sense because 6 months prior, I just lost my husband to cancer, and now there was the possibility that I had cancer. So it was just mind-blowing. I had the biopsy, and luckily it came back that the lump was called fibroadenoma, which is not cancerous, and it's very common. So that was a huge relief. But because I have dense breasts, my mom has dense breasts, they actually run in our family. And because they did find, the fibroadenoma, from that point moving forward, they wanted to kind of keep an eye on me and continue doing screenings. So in August of 2020, I had another mammogram. And the doctor said that they saw microcalcifications, which are just very tiny, for lack of a better term, just tiny dots kind of floating around, and they could be in different areas of your breast. The doctor told me that he was not concerned, that they were very common, and he said that they would just keep an eye on them. And I looked at the doctor and I said, my husband just passed away 6 months ago from cancer, so I am not going to keep an eye on anything that could potentially turn into cancer. I have 4 children. I am not going to do that. I'm not comfortable doing that. I said, so what are my other options? He said, we could send you for an MRI. I really don't think it's necessary, but if you insist, then I will, I will let you get the MRI. I said 100% I want the MRI. So there were a lot of issues getting the script for the MRI. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, just issues with doctors and scripts and insurance companies and appointments. And while all of these issues are going on, time is passing and you don't know what's happening inside your body. So what happened was I called my primary doctor. I went to him. I told him what was going on. He gave me a written script for the MRI. And it probably took me a few days, maybe a week. I called to make the appointment for the MRI. They said that the code on the written script was not the correct code. I called my doctor's office to tell them I needed a new script, and my doctor's office was closed. His office wound up being closed for several months. I didn't know where he was. I had no choice. I had to find another doctor, which took time. I had to find a local doctor that accepted my insurance. I finally found one. I went to talk to her. She gave me a written script. I went home. I tried to make the appointment for the MRI. They said it's not the correct code. In the meantime, I have 4 kids. We are busy. I was doing the best I could with trying to schedule this MRI. It was just taking a very long time with driving to different doctors' offices and getting written scripts. And for whatever reason, they had the wrong code on them. So finally, I had the script with the correct code and I scheduled the MRI. But between all of that time that had already passed and COVID and everything being screwed up, I did not have the MRI until January of this year. So I had the MRI and they called me, my doctor called me and said, I just got the results of the MRI and you need to have another biopsy as soon as possible. I knew that wasn't good. I knew they obviously saw something on the MRI. So I had another biopsy on February 23rd. And then on March 4th of this year, the results of that biopsy showed that I had invasive ductal carcinoma, which is a common type of breast cancer. And I guess the hardest part for me, not only accepting that I had breast cancer, which honestly, the thought of me getting any type of cancer really never crossed my mind because I thought, we already went through our horrific experience with losing Mark to esophageal cancer. So the thought of me ever developing any kind of cancer really never even crossed my mind. Once I came to terms with it, then I had to deal with telling my 4 children, and I knew they would obviously be upset and worried. But I had to tell them, and I couldn't promise them anything. I didn't know what stage my cancer was at. I didn't know what my treatment was going to look like. I didn't know what was going to happen. So I just had to be open and honest with them and told them, we'll just get through this together. So before I found out what my treatment plan was going to be, I also had genetic testing done. And that was interesting because I remember the doctor looking at me and saying, there's no way you're going to have a genetic mutation. It's so rare, but this is just something we do when people are diagnosed. And when they called me, it came back that I actually do have a genetic mutation. I have an ATM gene mutation, which makes me susceptible to early onset breast cancer, which I had. It can also make me susceptible to pancreatic cancer, stomach cancer. Kind of further down the list is ovarian cancer. So that was a really interesting part of my story because, supposedly these genetic mutations are so rare. One thing I wanted to point out about that's really important is that I only had one person in my family that had breast cancer. My grandmother, she's still alive. She's 96 years old. She looks amazing. And she had breast cancer around the age of 50. From what I know, just from family members telling me, she caught it early. She had radiation and she was fine. And like I said, she's 96 and she's still gorgeous as ever. But my point is, I think there is a misconception out there that, there are people, I have talked to several people within the past couple weeks and months where they said, oh, I have 5 or 6 people that had cancer or died in my family from cancer. And I tell them to definitely get genetic testing, but it doesn't have to be so many people that had cancer. You might not know your family history. Some people are adopted, some people don't talk about their cancer. So I think everybody should really have genetic testing done. Not everybody knows, your every person in your family's health history. So, you might just have one person in your family, like me, that had cancer, whether they survived or not, and you could still have a genetic mutation. It does not have to be multiple people. If you have multiple people in your family that have had cancer, get genetic testing done immediately, because it's just really important for yourself to know, for your other family members, not just your children. Even if you don't have children, it is crucial for men and women to be tested. This is not even just about breast cancer. This is across the board. Um, Genetic testing tests for all kinds of cancer, not just breast cancer. I wanted to talk about how we all, as I mentioned earlier, we all know October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and everywhere we look, we see pink ribbons. People are wearing pink. Some stores don't have anything to do with breast cancer awareness. Other stores have, they sell t-shirts or different merchandise related to, socks. I've seen some stickers, tons of different things, cups. And before I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I looked at the whole pink movement in a completely different way. Um, and so I know both sides now, and that's what I want to address, because before having breast cancer myself, I would see, I remember one October, I saw a huge group of people walking around Cooper River in pink tutus, and I just was like, oh, that's cute. It's pink. It's for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. There was no message in my mind. There was no takeaway from that other than they were wearing pink and walking around the river. And, I'm sure that donations were made to Susan B. Komen or another breast cancer organization. But there was no message in my mind where I said, oh, they're wearing pink because it means this, or we're supposed to do that, or we're bringing awareness to something specific. It was just pink. Just everything was pink. So now that I have, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I went through breast cancer treatment. And just to mention really quickly what my breast cancer treatment consisted of, I had a double mastectomy with reconstruction this past May. And then shortly after that, I had 24 radiation treatments. And then a few weeks ago, on September 21st, I had my tubes and ovaries removed. And in a few weeks, I will be starting an estrogen blocking medication that I'll take for 10 years. And the reason for the last surgery that I had and the medication is because the cancer that I had was estrogen receptive. So estrogen feeds the cancer. So taking the medication for 10 years is hopefully to keep the cancer from coming back. So going back to what I was just talking about with the pink, I just want to say this right off the bat. I am not against the pink ribbon. I am not against wearing pink. I just bought socks the other day with pink ribbons on them, and another pair of socks that say fight, and the I is a pink ribbon. I think they're great. I wore pink to a dance studio that I go to on Monday. I amped to dance. And Miss Dana, the owner, has been great about really promoting breast cancer awareness, but not just about the pink. She's putting the important messages out there, which I'll get to in a second. So she is having a week, this whole week, she says, for the dancers to wear pink. And the cool thing about the pink is that it's bright and it gets your attention, and it's for all of October. The problem with it is that there's no message behind the pink. So, for example, I was at Joann Fabrics the other day, and they had a very small section of breast cancer merchandise, which of course caught my attention. So I went over to see what they had. And one of the things said, peace, love, cure. And I just thought, what what the hell is what message is that sending women? Peace, love, cure. Okay, well, we don't have a cure right now, so we can pray for a cure all day long, but how's that saving anybody's life right now? How is that actually having an impact on anything right now? It's really not. It's kind of just this cute, marketing campaign almost. And then there were stickers, sheets of stickers that said, keep fighting, no one fights alone, brave warrior. And there's nothing wrong with that. Several of the shirts I wore during my radiation treatments said things like that: stronger than cancer, I'm a warrior, I'm a fighter. But that's because I was already going through cancer treatment and already had breast cancer. What I want to see happen and what needs to happen is that the pink movement and the whole idea between October being breast cancer awareness month and everything being pink and the pink ribbon, just pink everywhere, the messages need to be more about early detection and prevention, not just focused on women who have already been diagnosed and they're going through treatment. So I was trying to figure out a way to do that. And I recently did a breast cancer awareness photo shoot. And I had my point shoes on, and I was on the bridge, and I was wearing a pink bodysuit. So I was trying to figure out a way to make this all make sense to people, to get my point across, to keep it simple. So what I came up with as I was looking at these pictures, I was thinking at first, I want my point shoes to make sense. I don't want people to look at this picture and think, I don't get it. She's wearing a pink bodysuit, she's on a bridge in point shoes. I don't really get what this has to do with breast cancer other than the fact that she had breast cancer. So the first thing I came up with was breast cancer awareness. What's the point? Hence the point shoes. So the points, the three major points, there are numerous points, but the three major points I decided to focus on, I wanted to come up with an easy way to remember it. So I came up with GEM, GEM, because that's just something really easy to remember, which stands for genetic testing, examine, and mammogram. These are three very important things that could help a woman, hopefully prevent getting breast cancer, but if not, detecting it early. And as far as the bridge goes in the picture, I wanted that also to have some kind of significance. So what I came up with was bridging the gap between awareness and action. We already have October designated as Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and that's great. And we already have Wear Pink, which gets people's attention and at least brings awareness to breast cancer specifically, because there are tons of different kinds of cancer. So breast cancer has its own month. So that's all great. But we need to take the next step, and we need to take this a lot further. So the GEM, we'll just go through each one. The genetic testing, as I mentioned before, women get breast cancer even if you don't have a family history, and not everybody knows their family history. So I think I really strongly believe that everybody should talk to their doctor about genetic testing. I just spoke to a friend of mine that takes a ballet class with me, and it was really interesting because she said that she had recently had a doctor appointment, and that the doctor mentioned genetic testing after looking at her paperwork and seeing that there were people in her family that have had cancer. And I said, that's really interesting because we all know that when you go to a doctor, you fill out that form that says, has anybody in your immediate family had any of these health conditions? And cancer is always one of them. And it's almost like, I don't know if they even look at that paperwork, because if they did, I think a lot more people would be having genetic testing. Because if there's one person that you wrote down on that list that has had cancer, you should be having genetic testing. So this goes back to another point that just goes for everybody across the board, for not just breast cancer and not just cancer, just in general. You really have to advocate for yourself, and you can't wait for your doctor to bring things up. If you feel like you need an MRI, tell your doctor you need an MRI. If you feel like you need a mammogram, you need to demand a mammogram. And that goes for genetic testing as well. If your doctor's not bringing it up, it doesn't mean he's a bad doctor, but it's your responsibility to take control and advocate for yourself. So there's nothing wrong with you bringing that to your doctor's attention. Just say, I want genetic testing. It's a simple blood test, it's not a big deal. So I wanted to just mention that about genetic testing. I really, truly believe everybody should have that conversation with their doctor. If you've had anybody in your family that you know of that has had cancer, 100% do that immediately. Then I'm going to get into the E, which is for examine, and we're talking about self breast exams. This is the simplest thing, and it's free and it's easy and everybody can do it. It takes a few minutes. You can do it in the shower, you can do it when you're laying in bed, you can do it wherever you want. And without getting into all of the details, because you can just Google breast self exam and it will get into all the details about, you know, moving up and down, and then basically going up and down in a line and then going in a circle and which areas to do. So I'll just kind of, in a general sense, tell you what it consists of. So basically, you obviously want to check both breasts. You want to do the exam with your arm down. You want to put your arm behind your head, and you really want to make sure you check under your armpit lymph node area. And the important thing to remember is, everybody's breasts feel different, and they're different sizes, different textures. Some women just have, I don't want to say lumpy, but have lumps and bumps in their breasts, and myself included. The important thing is to know your baseline, to know what your breasts feel like on a day to day basis, before your period, during your period, after your period, because they can feel different during those times. So if you know what your baseline is, like, oh yeah, that's been there, that's fine, that's just what my breasts feel like, that is super important to know. If you feel anything new or different, that's when you need to bring that to your doctor's attention. And that's what happened to me. As I mentioned earlier, I was in the shower, I felt a lump, I went to my gynecologist. I think it was the next day, because I wanted to, talk to my doctor right away. So that being said, you do not want to hope or assume that you know what that lump or different thing that you're feeling is, which I've heard a lot of, and it's really, really unfortunate. So a couple common things, you might just think that's definitely a cyst. It's just a cyst, it's common, whatever. I'm not going to go to the doctor, I'm too busy. Some people think it's a blocked milk duct, which could be related to breastfeeding. You might currently be breastfeeding, or you just finished breastfeeding, and you might just think, oh, it happens, it's a blocked milk duct. It might be a fibroadenoma. The list goes on and on. It could be a ton of different things, but the bottom line is it could also be cancer. So you need to go to your doctor. I totally get that it's not convenient. We are, we have jobs and we're busy and we have kids, but we're talking about our lives and our health, and there's nothing that's more important. So going to your gynecologist and having it checked out and being sent for a mammogram, these are just things that we have to do. As I mentioned, definitely Google self breast exam. It just gets into more details. You can actually look at the charts and it will just kind of show you exactly how to do it and where to feel. But basically, you're just feeling around your entire breast on both sides. And as I mentioned, you want to put your arm up behind your head and definitely get under your lymph node area. Um, when I had my mastectomy, they were not able to tell me the stage of my cancer until the surgery because they removed 3 lymph nodes during the surgery, and they injected a dye before my surgery, and it travels to your lymph node area, and then they're able to tell if the cancer has traveled to your lymph nodes. So they removed 3 lymph nodes on my right side. Um, and one out of the 3 lymph nodes they actually said a tiny bit of cancer in it. But it didn't matter that it was just a tiny bit, and it didn't matter that it was just one out of 3 lymph nodes because it was still stage 2 because it traveled outside of my breast area to my lymph node area. So it was actually stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma. It's still considered catching it early. It didn't travel outside of the lymph node area, and it was only one out of the 3, which was a good thing. Um, if it didn't travel to my lymph nodes, I would not have needed the radiation. But because it did travel, the mastectomy and removing my breast tissue and the lymph nodes wasn't enough. So, which brings me to the M in GEM, which is for mammogram, which we've kind of covered. Unfortunately, mammograms start at 40, which in my opinion is much too late. I know women that are dying in their 20s and 30s from breast cancer. I hope one day to see that change, hopefully to 30. Um, that would be awesome. A lot of lives could be saved with that. But like I said, if you do the genetic testing and you're doing the self breast exams, you can get a mammogram sooner. That's why I was able to get mine at 38 because I felt something, went to the doctor, she sent me for a mammogram before the age of 40. So if you feel something, you can get that checked out. I'm going to read a few things I just have screenshotted on my phone. I screenshot things all day, every day. So, one thing says, "You're not a victim for sharing your story. You are a survivor setting the world on fire with your truth. And you never know who needs your light, your warmth, and raging courage." And I'm not just referring to myself for sharing my story. The reason I chose this specifically to end the episode with is because I really want to encourage other women to reach out and share their story. Whether you post something on Facebook or Instagram, start your own podcast. Also, I wanted to invite women to share their story with me. I can mention your story on the podcast, or if you're interested in being interviewed and being personally on the podcast, I can interview you. You can reach out to me at Valarie Dancing in the Rain at gmail.com. It's VALARIE Dancing in the Rain at gmail.com. I would love to have you on. As I mentioned earlier, everybody's breast cancer journey is so different. There are just so many different scenarios, different ages, different stages, different treatment plans. And I would love to get other women's stories out there. In future episodes, which I will fit into October, specifically for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I will cover specific information about my treatments. I'm really going to focus on the mastectomy because there are so many options with mastectomies. And when my doctor first said the word mastectomy to me, I had absolutely no idea that immediate reconstruction was even an option or even a thing. I didn't know anything about breast cancer. So I only knew about esophageal cancer. So this was all new to me. So when he said the word mastectomy, I really thought I was going to pass out on the floor. I didn't know that there were so many different options out there. And it's really important for women to know that whether you decide to have a prophylactic mastectomy like Angelina Jolie to prevent getting breast cancer, or whether you already have breast cancer and you're facing a mastectomy, there are so many different options. And I was really thankful for my surgery and my immediate reconstruction, and I'm happy with the results. And I just want people to know that there are options. Um, and I'll go over, what my radiation treatments were like, and also my most recent surgery. I have not started the medication yet, but I will definitely keep everybody posted when I do start it. Um, so there was one more thing I wanted to read. It says, sometimes you won't understand why you had to go through certain experiences until the very moment when the exact thing you went through is what allows you to help someone else. And that's why I am doing all of this. I, watched my husband suffer and die from esophageal cancer. And I just went through breast cancer treatment myself. And I know that there's a reason that I've experienced all these things. And I want to use it for good. I'm not going to keep this to myself. I will tell the whole world his story, and I will tell the whole world my story. And the podcast is one, way for me to do that. And I love it because I can get my messages out quickly. I can just record and get it out there immediately. Tomorrow, my story will actually be in the Northeast Times. So if you live in Philly or if you live close to Philly, you could pick one of those up.
It's probably today for most people.
Yeah. I don't even know what time it is. Okay. Yeah, it's almost 2 o'clock in the morning. So it will be in Wednesday's paper. Today is technically Wednesday. So you can pick that up, and it basically outlines Mark's story and my story and a few things about the podcast. And what I'm saying is the podcast, the newspaper, the breast cancer awareness photo shoot, all of these things that I'm doing, everything I post on social media, it's because I truly believe if I could just help one person, then all of this is worth it. And I've already had so many people I haven't talked to since grade school or high school, reaching out to me saying, because you have been so open about your story and posting all these things, I scheduled my mammogram. I had genetic testing, and everybody is very supportive and very encouraging. And another thing I wanted to mention was, even though October is focused on Breast Cancer Awareness Month, this is something that needs to be discussed every day of the year, because um, the more we talk about it, the more lives that can be saved. And just these simple messages, as I mentioned earlier, the genetic testing, the self breast exam, the mammograms, we can't just talk about this in October. It needs to be discussed all of the time. So, again, reach out to me if you have a story that you want to share about yourself or a loved one. And I would love to share it on the podcast. And I just really appreciate all of your support. If you have any questions, comments, or just want to reach out, you can email me at valariedancingintherain@gmail.com. And my name is spelled Valarie, dancingintherain@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your support.